Hey, Lounge fans. Before this episode begins, we want to thank our corporate partners, EY and Protiviti, for helping to make this podcast possible. Stay tuned to the Lounge and BHSA for some exciting opportunities with all our fantastic corporate partners. Now, on to the show.
Welcome to the Lounge.
Everybody, we are back and joined by Dr. Eric Eisenstein. Dr. E, thank you so much for coming to the Lounge today.
No problem at all. Happy to be here.
Great. So I think it would be a great place to start if you could just walk our listeners through your bio, quick summary of your background.
Okay, well, I have more degrees than a thermometer, as I tell you guys all the time when I start off class. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, so I started and got a bachelor's of science in economics and simultaneously a bachelor's in computer science as undergrad. After that, I went and spent 4 years management consulting for what is now Oliver Wyman. And after doing that for 4 years, decided I really wanted to go back and teach, and went back to Wharton, where I started in the marketing Ph.D. program on the quantitative side of marketing, which most people don't think that there is a quantitative side of marketing, but there is. Started on the quantitative side, picked up a master's in statistics, and midway through decided that I wanted to switch to the psychological side of marketing. So ended up graduating, studying the psychology of expertise and expert novice differences on the psychological side of marketing with a PhD in marketing. So that's the sort of academic and a little bit of the professional bio. After that, I worked at Cornell for 7 years at the Wharton School of Management, and I'm from Philadelphia. And when my daughter turned 5, I decided to move back and came back to Temple. I've been here ever since. This is now my 13th year at Temple.
Mm-hmm. So, switching from something like consulting, especially like Oliver Wyman, to teaching is, I feel like, a pretty big switch, and definitely something that takes a core reason, or, you definitely have to have some passion for teaching. So I guess my question to you is, how did you did you have like an aha moment of, what, I want to go back to teaching?
So there were actually a bunch of them. So being a professor is both about teaching and research. Mm-hmm. And in consulting, I always had a desire to both, I always wanted to explain. So I love the teaching part always. Okay. But I also wanted to understand the root way that each of the techniques that we were doing worked. And I loved being able to explain those to clients. That's actually one of the things that I absolutely loved about it. Was, okay, you have this incredibly complicated technique over here. How do you get that over here so that somebody else can understand that? And of course, that's very similar to what you hope to be going on in the classroom. So I always loved that about consulting, but I also really was frustrated by the fact that in a lot of times in corporations, they're doing things because it's expedient. And I wanted to know, well, what's the right way to do it? What if you were going to do this really the right way? And of course, the absolute best corporations in the world, you go to the Google, you go to the Facebooks, and you go to the most elite places in the most elite corporations. Maybe they're doing it exactly right. But 99% of the corporations in the world are just doing whatever the heck they happen to be doing. And I always wanted to know, well, what's that elite group doing that's the exact right thing? And you can sit there and be like, oh, it's so cool. Or whatever. So I figured that this was like the best way to be able to do that kind of stuff too.
So, with that desire to really understand and grasp those concepts, combined with the, as you said, more degrees than the thermometer in terms of your educational experience, I'm wondering what really made you decide on marketing when pursuing your doctorate? Because you had this amalgamation of experiences, and what really culminated in that decision to pursue marketing at that final level of education?
Well, so PhD, a lot of students, if you're thinking about pursuing graduate work in that arena, as opposed to a master's degree like an MBA or something like that, a professional degree, you got to understand what the degree is. A PhD is a research degree, and it is a narrowing. So people don't understand how much has been done before you. So people go into their PhD and they think to themselves, I'm going to study marketing. You're not going to study marketing, right? That's not possible. Like, you can't do that. You can't write a PhD on marketing. So then they think, I'm going to study pricing. No, you can't do that. Pricing is far, far, far too broad. Something like that. Or I'm going to study decision making. Nope, that's millions of times too broad. So what's going to happen is you're going to take this giant concept and you're going to winnow it down and winnow it down and narrow it down and narrow it down. And eventually what's going to happen is you're going to get to something that's about the width of a laser beam. And you're going to study that. And you are going to be the world's leading expert on some laser beam-like thing that you're going to study, right? So you have got to be ridiculously interested in the laser beam, right? I mean, like, you're going to be the world's leading expert on your laser beam, right? So you're going to illuminate, if you think about like knowledge as a sheet, right? That where human beings are illuminating the sheet with light, and that's the knowledge that we're illuminating. You've got to think of, you're going to be shining your laser, which is very bright light, but you're going to not be shining it across some huge expanse of this sheet. You're going to be shining your laser in a tiny little dot where you're going to illuminate, okay, that's the spot that I came up with, this brand new thing that no one else has ever learned, but like, that's my area that I have contributed to human knowledge is right there, like in this dot, okay, is like this spot. So why marketing? Well, once you start getting to that understanding, now you can start getting a lot of nuance about what these degrees really are. And when I looked around, there are degrees where superficially, if you think to yourself, economics, that's really interesting. But when you think about, well, what's a PhD in economics look like? It doesn't look nearly the same as concepts in economics. What you start getting is you start getting something very different. You get a huge amount of just pure math, of just optimization theory or whatever. And this is true, like you walk across a lot of fields. What really attracted me to marketing is that it sits at the intersection of economics, psychology, and statistics. And those were the things that I really found interesting. I found each of those subjects incredibly interesting, and I was very interested in how people make consequential decisions. And building mathematical models of that and being able to understand the statistics behind how that works. And that was exactly sort of what happened. And then what I said before was midway through, I decided that I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to write a PhD dissertation on doing that in data over here. I wanted to actually look at it in cognitive psychology. And so I basically did a dissertation in the psychological side, but that's because I had desires to do both. And so I was really interested in both.
Mm-hmm. And so speaking of that laser beam, of that, that sheet of knowledge that we uncover over time, could you talk a little bit more about your involvement with the MS and business analytics here, and maybe some of the differences that you see between teaching, for example, your master's students versus your undergrad students?
Well, all right, so the MS in Business Analytics is the specialized master's degrees in general are a set of degrees that are rising in popularity. Historically, the business degree of choice was the MBA. You had an MBA and that was basically it. So if you wanted a master's or a graduate degree in business, you got an MBA. And what has happened is that business world has changed. So increasingly, it's become apparent that specialized skills are also being rewarded and needed in business. And the MS in Business Analytics is one of the specialized master's degrees that we offer at the Fox School, but are becoming very popular, that are designed to bridge the gap between people who are super techie in some field, but don't have any business knowledge, and people who basically are general purpose managers, which is an MBA, or somebody with an undergrad degree in business, but firms like an MBA, let's be serious, right? They want the maturity and they want the fact that people have applied something over here at a level, undergrads are here, and then they get experience. Now you go back to school, it's very different when you then take those, classes that are similar in name, but you're now applying that knowledge having had experience in the job, and you get to go and see, oh, I get it. Like when I had that situation and it's my situation and I own it, and I get to reapply it. So what these degrees are doing is they're giving you specialized knowledge frequently, if not always, not always, but frequently, to people with experience. And then the MSBA in particular, the MS in Business Analytics in particular, is designed, in my mind, to train people to be translators. What I always say is from data to decisions and decisions to profit. So the idea is you have business analysts, and in an ideal world, those analysts sit between people over here who speak geek and people over here who speak profit, right? And if I'm now the analyst, I sit in the middle and I turn to these people and I say, okay, tell me all the geeky things, right? And I understand exactly what's going on over here on the geeky side. And then I turn over here and I say, oh, all you people, you understand profit. Let me translate what they said. They said geekity, geekity, geekity. And I say over here, let me tell you about the finances and build an Excel model so that we can talk about like how much money we're going to make as a result of geekity, geekity stuff. And like, if you just try to have these two people talk, or groups talk, what typically happens is they don't understand each other, and it doesn't really work because the people that are basically trying to manage and our general managers don't understand enough of the geek stuff to really manage it. It looks like a black box. People don't trust black box models. They then don't follow those directions. And firms that actually engage in more data-driven decisions make better decisions. They win more in the marketplace. Doesn't take much to up your decision-making capability just a little bit to win enough that you have an edge that basically, you know, increases profits, increases your stock price, you know, has all the downstream effects that basically you want in terms of how those work.
Right. And so, I mean, being a business analyst, that's an incredibly important position. I mean, forget about just in the corporate world. I can personally think of applications in, for example, startups, right? More often than not, what I've been seeing is maybe we'll have a manager or, you know, a founder or a co-founder who has a vision for a product or a service, but they can't translate that vision to the technical side of things and the, you know, the product developers and the coders. And so, you know, that's a huge point of failure. And so I guess over your years in the industry, have you seen that become a problem in not just the corporate world, but maybe in the startup world or any other areas that you've seen?
Just in general, a failure to be able to use data is it is a foundational flaw in almost every place that I've ever seen. And honestly, not just in entrepreneurial type worlds, a lot of times, I'll be totally honest, in many entrepreneurial worlds, the biggest challenge that they have is just pure operations. People think it's going to be all about sales and the vision and stuff like that. But the truth is that if you talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, the biggest problem they have is that once they have like a decent product and stuff like that, it's just delivering like a quality product that is like not crazy and that like you're just doing this stuff on time and like the way you want. And if you go to Kickstarter and just go look down Kickstarter at the number of delayed projects, which is all of them actually, like, I mean, none of them are ever on time. You just instantaneously realize that all the challenges are logistics and just delivery. And honestly, it's the weirdest thing about being an entrepreneur is that like people expect it's going to be like all about sales and stuff. And it can be like there, you know, you do need to make those first sales. But the truth is that like delivering your first like 1,000 units of whatever it is, or your first, you know, couple hundred projects or whatever the thing is probably harder than anything else and staying in business doing that. The other place, though, where you see huge amounts of these failures is in not-for-profits. I mean, so like what happens is like I do a lot of not-for-profit work and it's just, it's like numbers don't exist. Like somehow or another, people have incredibly good intentions, but then there's the logistics aspect, which is numbers. There's the aspect where it's like, you know, greatest good for the greatest number. How can I take a limited amount of money and spend that in a way that is going to maximize my return? But now it's not financial return. We're not talking about money that I'm trying to get back. I'm trying to help people. We're literally trying to go and save lives, feed people, give people fresh water, whatever it is. But you know, you're trying to do this. You're trying to make your money go farther. And what would be incredibly helpful is analytics. I mean, you're not going to. That's the best possible thing that we know how to do. That's exactly what we want. And so not-for-profits, and then every business. I mean, I've just never been anywhere where the biggest problem that people have is that it's like more meetings. And that's never been a problem, right? What we really need to do is have another meeting. What we really need is to have more data and more people that understand how to use the data. And then what happen is that people will understand that better. And once they understand how their business runs, what the profitability drivers are, and okay, oh, how much money are we basically wasting on? It was actually just led a session at a company the other day. And customers call in and they say, you sent me a notice, blankety blank. And the customer service reps, I can't make this up, the customer service reps in their computer system don't have access to any mailings that have been sent to the customer. So the customer service rep has to be like, let me put you on hold for a minute and call another division of the company. And basically, for all practical purposes, they may as well look it up in a filing cabinet. I mean, it's like, we're like one step away from literally having a secretary pull a filing cabinet open and like shoot through a thing and be like, Eisenstein. Okay, here's your file. Yes, we sent you this telegram on, whatever, by Morse code. And it's like, we're literally one step away from it in 2020. And this is a Fortune 100 company that I was literally in the other day. And they're telling me that if you called in as a customer, it's 2020. And you just sit there, you could go through how many dollars per year. I mean, you could add up how many minutes of customer service rep time is that? And you just multiply that thing. Like, if that's happening at the customer service rep level, how many times does that happen? Their vendor database, I can guarantee you their entire vendor database is therefore not linked. So nobody over here in this division knows who they're using over here for this vendor, which means that every single vendor is now like in some completely thing, they have no national discounts. So that's 10% on all their costs that they're paying too much. So you just go through every single thing, and I could go through that company, and basically if you gave me a team of 100 people, you could probably cut like 10% on their costs, like across the board. You just go through the whole thing, but it's gonna take $100 million investment to go link up all their computer systems, make a data lake, go figure out what all this is doing, have somebody who's a competent financial analyst actually sit down and like run the numbers to figure out that is the customer service rep thing the most important, or is like the vendor thing more important to do first, like in terms of like the programming and blah, blah, blah. And but I guess what I'm saying, Mohak, is that like that's the art. I mean, when I say analytics, it's a combination of you need the data, you need it all in one spot. Then you need somebody that actually knows how to analyze data. And you need somebody who understands finance at the end of that to take, oh, these look like there's a lot of transactions. Well, how much money is there on that? Like, it's not enough to count. Like, counting things is interesting, but like, there could be 1 million things at 1 cent, and there could be like 10 things at $10 million. And like, shouldn't be confusing them, right? So like somebody has to have like an order of magnitude sense of where these things are. And as soon as you get that, you should be able to run through these things in no time flat. But corporations don't.
Right, which is surprising.
Yeah. Is there something else I can?
Serious thoughts.
That's indicative of really, the growing pains of running a company in the new digital world that we're in. And I think it's surprising and you talk about this in your class as well, that that some of these companies that we see as the most efficient leaders in the business world really on the back end still have these operational problems. And that's just a sign that there's something wrong between translating from the traditional business model over to the new business model. And that's also something you've talked about in the differences between what people consider to be marketing in the traditional academic sense and marketing that actually occurs in today's business world. So I'm wondering if you could explain some of those differences and how you address those differences in your class.
Biggest differences that I see are that and of course it depends on the industry. There are marketing driven industries. So if you went to P&G or SC Johnson or even like a firm like American Express, they are quite marketing driven. So that's a little bit different. But as a general rule, in academic worlds, marketing owns the 4 Ps, right? And so in marketing classes in an academic environment, we would be, you would be taking classes and learning about product, which is like what product you should be producing, you know, in terms of what customers want, features, all that kind of stuff. Price, which is by far and away the most important decision conditional on getting the product that a consumer would want. It's the most important decision that a firm's going to make about that product is how to price it. And by the way, the two of those interact because usually you don't just have one product and be like, okay, I make this, you know, and like, here it is, I make this one product. Usually you have several products in what we call a product line, right? So if you think of cars, you don't just have one car. Ford doesn't have one car. They have like a small car and a medium car and a large car and a luxury car. And like within those, they have trim models. Like, so like, it's not just one model of, you know, car, or Toyota doesn't just have like one Camry, they have like several Camrys. And so you have to figure out the prices of all of those. And you need to price things in such a way that consumers aren't like, well, it's so obvious that I'm just going to upgrade right to the next one, and no one will ever buy this one. Like, you have to always make the trade-off something that's hard for the consumers, so that people are like, well, I kind of want that one, but it's a stretch, right? You know, because if it's not that, then like people would just ignore, and you just like have this product that like no one will ever buy, right? So if you make it too expensive, no one will buy it. If you make it too cheap to upgrade, then no one will buy the cheap one, right? So you need to make something that's there, and you also don't want to have products in some line. Okay, so pricing and product interact very strongly, right? You have placement, which is really channels of distribution, which is supply chain, what we call place, right? Fourth P, price, product, place, price, promotion. So you've got advertising, right? That's a huge fraction of what a firm actually does, right? So you have other functions, but a lot of the other functions that firms do are actually support functions. HR, you know, risk and insurance, finance, accounting. These are all actually usually not the primary functions of a firm, right? They're usually the things that you do in order to keep the firm running. You know, the firm is what I just described, those four things. Like, this is how we're going to market. This is the product we're going to market with. This is what we're actually doing. This is the firm. And then, like, you know, there's these other things that we're going to do, which is that we're going to keep track of the money. We're going to forecast how much money we're going to have. We're going to make sure that we are like liquid enough. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that you need to do. It's not that they're not important. You better have those things if you want to run your firm, but they're usually not the central functions of the firm. In the real world, usually the four functions that I described of marketing tend to get divided up, and they're not called marketing. And there's a lot of reasons for that. The main reason for that is that just being honest, there's not enough human capital that's really strong that goes into marketing. So what happens is that the marketers aren't analytic enough. They're not good enough at finance. They're not good enough at doing other things. So the absolute top firms like Procter & Gamble and, you know, places to a certain extent like Apple, places like that, those companies will have product managers who are true marketers. And those firms will have marketers essentially at the top frequently, at the very, you know, going all the way through and running their product lines. And they'll understand that, or at least people with a marketing understanding doing that. But a lot of firms, what ends up happening is that the pricing function or the product design function ends up being some other function. So product design ends up in tech, like, you know, in the engineering group. And the engineering group just designs products. And they just go design stuff the way they think they should design stuff. The pricing stuff gets done by finance, because they're the ones that can figure out the numbers and things like that, and they're the ones with the analytic talent, or some such. And what's left over for marketing is sales and promotion and a little bit of like distribution. Well, distribution is another one. Distribution is a ridiculous science these days. So logistics is its own thing, right? And then the questions of strategy of who owns, well, should we deal direct with a customer? Should we sell direct to the customer? Should we sell through Amazon? Should we sell to big box retail like Home Depot and Lowe's and Sam's Club and places like that? Or should we only sell through, you know, nicer stores, right? Like, you know, and where does Target fall in that? Is Target a nicer store, or is it like Walmart? Is it really big box? Is Target, Target's not Macy's. So like, how does that work? I mean, all those kinds of questions from a branding point of view. Who's making that? Is that the marketer, or is that like somewhere else in the corporation? Well, that's probably marketing, but like at the same time, the logistics people and everybody else, the strategy people are going to have a say. So that's a huge split that happens in the real world that happens. But in here, like at Fox or in any business school, all that discussion is only going to be in the marketing department by and large.
So along with, I guess, explaining that split or that difference in the real world to your students, is there anything else that you would aim to have your students walk away from your classes with? Obviously, the answer might be different for your undergrad and your master's students, but in general, when your students walk away from your class, what's maybe one thing that you'd want them to walk away with in their head?
Well, you guys may or may not know that I'm jointly appointed in marketing and statistics. So I actually teach different classes. I don't teach the graduate students marketing. I used to teach marketing strategy, which is a little different. I teach honors intro marketing undergrad, but I teach intro business analytics to the MBA students and to the business analytics students. The thing that if I were going to say what I would walk away with is it's the value of starting with relatively small models, right? And then building up. And the reason that is so valuable is because what models do is models force you to instantiate your assumptions in real terms. It's no longer good enough to be like, we're going to sell a lot. Really? What's a lot? I mean, it's fine. A lot's great. So is a lot 100,000 units, or is a lot 200,000 units, or a million units? Because it's going to matter, right? Okay, like what are the costs? I think the costs will be manageable. That's great. What's manageable, right? And as soon as you start doing this, that's the exercise, right? How long is it going to take to put this together? Oh, we should be able to do it in no time. Really? Well, it's not going to be 0. So what will be the time, right? And each of these things, the exercise of doing that is the thing that gets you or anybody good. That is the thing, because what happens is that after you've done it 20 times, go talk to somebody like my brother, who's an entrepreneur in real estate, right? My brother started off renovating houses that were like, beat up houses that were row homes that he could buy for $25,000, right? Well, that's a $25,000 project. And maybe the renovation is another $25,000, and it's a couple of guys, right? Right now, he's managing $25 million projects. You will find exactly the same thing. The truth of the matter is, when I was at Oliver Wyman, when I was doing consulting, I worked on projects where some of the projects had maybe like little things where we were modeling stuff in the $100,000, $200,000 range. And some of the projects that I worked on I modeled a division of AT&T, which was $12.5 billion. And I pretty much modeled it down to like, $1 million here and there, like a couple $1 million here and there. Like we had footing, every dollar that came in and went out here and there. You know what? From the spreadsheet's point of view, doesn't matter one bit to me. You round to the same number of significant figures, it's exactly the same. You're not putting 9 zeros after your numbers, right? Like 12 billion is 12.56, and if it's 1.5, and if it's 12.56 million, it's 12.56. And the only difference is that I changed the M to a B. And it doesn't make any difference to me. So the reality is, I say this over and over and over again. If you guys want to know, the goal, honestly, if you guys can graduate Fox and you could model Saxby's coffee, go down to Alter Hall and build me a model of Saxby's coffee. And then I should be able to ask you anything. What should they change in their staffing? What would happen if they bought a new coffee machine? What would be the effect of having 50% more people show up at lunchtime? What would happen here? What would happen there? If you can do that, you can model AT&T. Doesn't make any difference. Makes no difference. It's exactly the same model. The fact is, the one's bigger. I got it. It is exactly the same model over and over and over again, whether you're modeling an airline or you're modeling whatever. All that happens is if you stick with one industry, like my brother's in real estate, he doesn't need the model anymore. Because I can tell you right now that after you been doing it for 20 years, all that happens is the model's in your head. You take, I study the psychology of expertise. The model's in your head. You take one look at it, and all you do is you take one look at it, and you're like, okay, that's going to take 2 weeks to do that, 1 week to do that, blah, 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 blah. You snap your fingers 15 times, and you know what all the costs are and everything else like that, and you can estimate within 5-10% in your head what the overall structure of the deal is going to be. And then then you can have somebody write it down more carefully if that's what you want to do. But the most important possible thing that you can do starting off is you need to actually start off building the models so that you don't forget anything. And the second part of that is that you build your intuition about, oh, these are the levers that are going to matter. Like, this is the thing that when I said before, what's more important, the vendor thing or the customer service thing? Building your intuition in an industry or in a given area, that's the intuition that you have to develop. Is we used to say in consulting, what's the leverage, right? Remember, leverage is that thing, there's somebody's, was it Aristosthenes, one of the two of them. Don't remember which Greek said,
somebody Greek.
Give me a suitably long lever and a place to stand, and I alone will move the world, right? But leverage is the thing where you push a little bit and you get a lot of force, right? So it magnifies your leverage. So high leverage inputs are things when you move them a little, the outcome changes a lot, right? So that's what you're looking for. In any model, what you're looking for is, what do I need to spend more time researching? And that's the thing that you're really, really interested in. You're really interested in asking the question, oh, which of these things do I have to focus on? Well, as I said, after 20 years, people know. Actually, if you're in the same industry, things like real estate do not change that much. Cost structure is not changing that much. The reality is people understand those industries really well. In fast changing industries, in industries where things are uncertain, and in industries where you're unfamiliar with it, you build the model. When you build the model and you do it right, the model tells you these are the things to focus on. And then you're like, great, now I can focus my attention on those things that are important and not these other things that are not so important. And I'm like,
Most definitely. I think it's a great piece of advice for our listeners to understand that building the tuition in that industry of choice, whatever it might be, is such a huge area to focus on, especially in your undergraduate career. So I'm wondering, outside of those, maybe your traditional coursework and your internship experience, have you found a way to help your students, sort of work on developing that intuition that you were talking about it could be in marketing analytics, but really in any space, especially on the freshmen, coming into this class, what should they be focusing on in terms of building out that industry knowledge?
It's really a hard thing. So the honest to God truth is that there's no shortcut to that, because building models is honestly the fastest way, to get to it. But the single piece of advice that I would give is, and it's very old fashioned, read. I mean, the thing that I see the most is that, and I see this, I hate to reveal my elderliness and my age, if my gray shot, mustache and beard are not doing it. But I see this with my kids, but I see this all the time. A lot of people are in business school because they're like, oh, business is cool, in an abstract sense. The Wall Street Journal or the Financial Times, just pick your thing, but The Economist, whatever these business journals are, if they're not actually interesting, if reading about Apple is not interesting, if reading about what's going on in the corporate world is not interesting, that's a problem, right? It has to be at least somewhat interesting to you to sort of feel like, oh, wow, that company did X, and that's like something that is interesting that they did. Why did Microsoft do that? Microsoft just closed all their stores. Why did they do that? Amazon just did whatever. Why did they do that? Somebody just did something else. Why did they do that? Apple just went all ARM processors. They're bringing their silicon in-house. Why are they doing that and getting rid of Intel? Why? And then, like, so that's one part. So first of all, understanding what's going on in the industry in general is like incredibly important. But the second part of that is asking why. There's never an answer like that, which is for fun. That is never the answer. So that has never been the answer. The answer is always they think they're going to make more money. So the next answer to that is, why do they believe they're going to make more money? Like, why do they, what is going on? And if you start getting in the habit of asking that, and then if you go and read a little bit more and try to find a more in-depth article that might answer the question of why they think they're going to make more, that tends to be the other part of how you can find some other people that are doing the analysis for you that will kind of walk you down. Oh, that was the chain of events. Apple believes that basically, like, you know, they can design even faster computers with even better battery life that are even thinner, that unite their ecosystems. Oh, what's that going to do? That's going to basically make it so that blah, 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 blah. So they cut out Intel. They don't have to pay Intel money. That's a cost savings thing. But there's this secondary thing on a product design part, which is that very shortly, Apple's going to have computers that are, you know, half the weight and twice the speed of anything that anybody else can offer, because they have the ability to control the silicon and also control the the design of the hardware and the software, and they'll put them together like this. And basically by doing that, it's going to basically be the thickness of an iPad, and it's going to be like, you know, the exact same thing as, like, you know, as a laptop, except it'll be, you know, they'll take the weight in half, and it's going to run like the same speed because they've already got the speed there. So unbelievable, right? Like, you know, it's like, okay, I got it. Now I understand. And they make ridiculous amounts of money on those. So that's the other thing that you can do is, honestly, is read, but you can't be reading Snapchat. Like, that's the problem. I mean, you won't get it on social media. Like, you got to be doing that in, like, the, you know, Bloomberg, Financial Times, Economist, like, you know, Wall Street Journal. You got to be doing that in, like, something that's actually, like, serious business press, and looking at that.
At least in between Snapchats, right?
What's that?
At least in between Snapchats.
Yeah, that's right. No, I mean, I don't mean don't read any Snapchat. I just meant that, like, you have to actually have a source of news that is about the business world, you know, and what's going on. And by the way, just let me just say as an aside, that will massively, massively, massively help you in interviews. So, like, I mean, do not ever confuse this. You can go and talk to anybody in CSPD and they will confirm this. It will massively help you in interviews. So when you go and interview with anyone, the fact that you know not just about a company, but about the business world in general, and you can talk about that, will cause people to look at you in a totally different light, and you will seem head and shoulders more mature than the other people who are interviewing, because you will seem like, oh, this is somebody who's graduating or who's interviewing, like, as a summer intern, who is not here in terms of, okay, they have some technical knowledge and they've got a good GPA, but they're here and they have, like, all these other things that they bring to the table because they know all about this other stuff. And by the way, we hear this from the big four accounting firms who are huge proponents of this. They want students to be well-rounded and to understand all the stuff about what's going on. They want people to know about what's going on in Bitcoin and what cryptocurrencies are and what all these other things are, regardless of whether they're going to do them in their job. Nothing to do with it. They just want them to know what is blockchain. You know, you don't need to have a class on blockchain. Like, every single bit of information that I know about blockchain, I know from reading basically the business press. Like, you know, you don't need to take a class on that. I mean, and nobody does. I mean, you could, but nobody needs to. So, I mean, you could learn everything you need to know easily in, you know, 10-minute increments.
And Professor Eisenstein, what are some of the sources you read on a daily basis?
I've actually, honestly, so my iPad here is, like, attached to me for all practical purposes. it is essentially now may as well be just attached to my arm. So I have become an Apple News devotee. So Apple has learned my preferences, but I subscribe to the Wall Street Journal through Apple. So actually at this point, so I have a Wall Street Journal subscription. I have a Washington Post subscription also, but that's like not for business news really. But I have a Wall Street Journal subscription, and generally speaking, what happens is that that when I find an interesting story, I just click right through on Wall Street Journal through Apple. So I do almost all my general reading on there. There's some other stuff. Medium.com is like really cool for just some interesting things. Quora has some interesting stuff. Like if you just want to have like kind of random things that are there, but those are more random and less pure businessy. Like they tend to be more specialized things. But I basically just do the Wall Street Journal. I'm mostly because it was easy, honestly. But they all give huge student discounts, if not free, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, I think so. Those are definitely some good sources. And it'll give the readers a good glimpse into maybe if they haven't started reading it, or if they don't read the news on a daily basis. First, you gave them a good reason to. And then second, also, they have some good sources to go to.
Gotcha. Dr. E, that about wraps it up for this interview. We want to thank you so much for taking the time to talk. Definitely some really valuable lessons for all of our listeners. And, we'll hope to hear from you soon.
No problem. Great seeing both of you. I hope you guys are staying safe and COVID-free, and hoping that this nightmare is over soon enough that we can all get back to campus and have a giant get together.
Most definitely. Thanks again.
Yep. Thank you.
All right. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to The Lounge, a BHSA podcast.